last two videos, we explored how to fetch data from our local database as opposed to the online database, online data source. And we've also talked a little bit about exceptions. I'm going to reorganize this program a little bit now so that we can see what happens when we are unable to connect to the network. So to start with, just for the moment, honestly, I like the way this is designed, but for the moment I'm going to comment out our search to the offline database for plants. And I'm going to take our online search, I'm going to take this if count plants, I'm going to move this if test outside of the for loop here, and a little more reorganization. That's going to require that I take the close curly and move that as well. And the effect of this is that I'm always going to be searching online for plants. Okay, looks like we're all set there. I'm always going to be searching online for plants right now, and this is just so I can demonstrate how it should work if we're properly connected to online data, and how it will work if we're not connected. So I'm going to snap a breakpoint on the do in background, and let's talk about what's going to happen here. We're going to declare a collection that will hold our plants. We are going to enter a try block. In that try block, we are going to try to fetch plants online. Okay, so plant DAO fetch plants. Let's see what happens in here. Well, we'll go to the actual implementation. We'll go to the plant DAO. One moment, please. Okay, plant DAO. And plant DAO is going to try to access this URL, and it's going to make a network DAO request. Now, network DAO, that's where we get down to the bits and bytes of actually going across the network. If something goes wrong, that's going to throw back an exception. Now, remember the rules with an exception. Option number one, if we can handle it locally and heal ourselves, let's do that. Option number two, if we're in a UI layer and we cannot handle the exception, we might want to inform the user that something's gone wrong. Option number three, if we cannot handle it locally and we're not in a UI layer, let's throw it back up to the calling layer. So network DAO is going to throw this IO exception back to plant DAO. Plant DAO doesn't have a try catch block, so it's going to rethrow the exception up to GPS a plant. At that point, the exception will be thrown here, and when an exception is thrown, it means it skips every line until it reaches the catch block. So that's the behavior we're going to expect to see when we go offline. So what I'm going to do now, just to make sure things work as they expect, I'm going to go ahead and run this online, then I'll go offline, we'll watch it again. Just a moment please as I raise the emulator. At this point the emulator has started and it's waiting for our background thread to run. So I'm going to choose F8 and we'll see that this will basically process as we expect. The important part is going to come in just a few more lines. Okay, so just so you see what's going on the other screen on my emulator, the progress dialog has appeared now, and F8. Okay, this is the part that's going to result in a network call. This will take a little bit of time. The nice thing is, because this is in a separate thread, my emulator is still responsive, and if I want, I can choose that cancel button. This will take some time, so I'm going to pause the video. We'll come back as soon as it's back. And now you see we've moved to the next step. I'll choose F8, F8. And eventually, this will complete and populate our autocomplete text. And you see it skipped the catch block. I'll choose F9, which will let it process. And we get to the on post execute, which means it has received the results. I choose F9 again. And you see as I start typing Magnolia, matching names appear in the drop-down. Now again, I know that the color's a bit off, but you see that the autocomplete is showing matches that match what I'm starting to type, and I can select one. Let's try this again, but this time I'm going to disconnect the network, and I'm going to add a breakpoint in the catch block. One moment. Now with my network disconnected, notice that it tries to, it shows the progress dialog, but it jumps straight to the catch block here. It attempts to connect to the network, but the exception that we get is an unknown host exception. Just a moment, we'll see if we can get that to come up. Unknown host exception. That means, hey, I can't get out to see the world. And we see here, unable to resolve host plantplaces.com, no address associated with this host name. Now, the problem here is we're not handling this graciously. We're just printing the stack trace, and then if I choose F9 and F9 again, it's going to take us back up to where it sets the autocomplete. And because the list of plant DTOs is empty, there's going to be nothing in the autocomplete now. So I can type whatever I want. We're not going to get an autocomplete. Now, this isn't tremendously a burden to the user because this is simply an autocomplete. It's not actually data like search result data. This is just meant to help the user with the screen. If it were actual data that was required to run our app, that would be a bigger burden and we'd probably want to do something. Nonetheless, leaving a catch block empty is never a good idea. It's also not a good idea to return null because then you throw away a very informative message and you get back a very informative null pointer exception. A good way to fix this is what we did in a previous lesson where we simply say, okay, well, if I can't go online, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over and I'm going to try to use my local data source. So once again, notice I type in red and notice that no suggestions come up because this exception said, hey, I can't get any data, so I'm not going to pre-populate the autocomplete text with any data. Let's try it this time as soon as I resolve my issue. Looks like we have, yeah, okay, 1 second. We'll just grab this entire block that we put together last time. We'll put that in here. Let's try it this way, and this time what we're doing is we're saying, okay, well, you know, if I can't go online, in the exception, I have an opportunity to try something else. And that exception block is a great time to go offline, to use our local data source, which honestly for an autocomplete text we should use anyway. But this is a good opportunity or a good chance where we're showing that we can use exceptions to make our programs more bulletproof. We can use exceptions to give us very good information, and that information is I'm offline. And then the catch block gives us an opportunity to recover from that information, from the information that the exception gives us. And in this case, we're saying, okay, if I'm offline, use a local data source. So let me try this one, and we'll watch this one again. I'll leave the breakpoint where it is here. Now you notice we're in the doing background, and the app has come up and is trying to download plant names, but of course it's going to fail. I'll choose F8 several times until we get to our next breakpoint where it's going to try to go online, and then it will time out and throw an exception and go to our catch block. Okay. It might take a moment for this exception to occur. If it does, I'll pause the recording. Now you see it's jumped to the catch block, so I'll choose F8. We do our normal print stack trace, and just to verify, I'll mouse over the E and you see unknown host exception, just as we saw before. The difference is this time, take a look. We're simply going to go to our local source of data and gather plants from there. Okay, this will take just a moment. The next step, our blue line should go down to the return statement. And it appears we have our data. I choose F8. All plants, I'll give a quick mouse over of this, and we see it's an array list. Probably going to have, yep, 3,052 plants, the same number that was inserted before. I choose F9 to continue, and remember this is in the doIn background method, which runs in a separate thread. The next method to pick up should be the onPost execute, which is going to take that array and assign it to our autocomplete text. And sure enough, it lands in our onPost execute method. I'll choose F9 to let that method complete. And now I'm going to come back over to my emulator and type in Magnolia. We'll give it just a moment. And sure enough, again, I know it's hard to see, but if I click on one, you'll see Magnolia acuminata. Sure enough, it has populated this list And I can assure you, if I can go down and show you, you can see down here I've turned off wireless access, so my computer is currently not on wireless. So I can assure you that I'm not on wireless. So in this video, what we've seen is that we can leverage the very valuable and important information that's available to us in an exception, and we can use that information to recover from a not ideal situation. Now, I am going to go ahead and reset this back before I commit it to GitHub. I am going to go ahead and move some things around just a bit to make it look like it did earlier, because it really is recommended that we, one moment please, we'll do like so, count plants. Okay, if we have less than 100 plants, it's recommended that we always use offline data for autocomplete text where possible. So I'm going to go ahead and put that if test back in, and that if test will, I need to clean it up a little bit more apparently, but the if test will say, hey, if we do have local data, let's go ahead and use our local data. So I'm going to do this and commit it. In our next video, we're going to see what we need to do to be able to figure out which plant we selected in this autocomplete text. After we do that, we're going to be able to save it locally to our local database. I'll see you then.